I was shaking. My palms were sweaty and my throat was dry, but my mind was churning in a whirlwind of anger and humiliation. I couldn't stop thinking about the messages. The words were burned into my mind like a red-hot iron. No matter how many times I blinked or rubbed my eyes, the images and phrases came back. I'll wait for you at the party. I can't wait to see you. The words I had read so many times echoed like thunder. The confirmation was there. There was no room for doubt. She was there. With him. My heart pounded as I drove. The sound of the engine seemed distant, muffled by the growing fury. I knew exactly where she was. I could even imagine the scene. The smiles, the furtive glances, the hands touching as if no one was watching. I knew. And I also knew what I needed to do. The house was lit up, laughter echoed down the street. I parked the car anyway, slammed the door and walked purposefully inside. The sound of voices and music seemed to mock me. My footsteps echoed across the marble floor, but no one seemed to notice. They were too busy, drunk on music and wine. And there, in the middle of the room, as if it were a materialized nightmare, she was. Radiant, in the dress that I had bought her for her birthday. Laughing at something he had just said. Him. The man who, until a few days ago, I called my friend. She didn't see me right away. I could have stood there, watched silently as the charade unfolded, but the pain in my chest exploded. Can you explain to me what is happening here? My voice cut through the noise like a blade. All eyes turned to me. She froze. He, on the other hand, widened his eyes and tried to hide the glass of wine as if that could erase the guilt on his face. I laughed, a bitter, dry laugh. You don't need to say anything, I continued. I already know. I know everything. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I kept walking until I was between the two. So that's it. All this time, my voice trailed off, but I forced myself to continue. I should have known. The silence in the room was suffocating. A buzz started in the corners, and someone turned down the music. I stared at her. She tried to grab my arm, but I backed away. Don't you dare touch me. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. I could not. Humiliation burned inside. I just came here to make something clear. I turned to the guests who were watching us with curious and shocked looks. He finished. That's what you wanted to know, right? Well, now you know. I'm divorcing her. Here and now. Someone gasped, and the murmur increased. She took a step forward. Please, can we talk in private? Private? I laughed again. Were you worried about privacy when you decided to come here with him? When did you decide to betray me? He tried to butt in. Look, I think you're exaggerating. But I stopped him. Exaggerating? I got so close that I could smell the alcohol on his breath. You have the audacity to say that I'm exaggerating? After destroying my marriage? After stealing what was mine? He took a step back, and I saw the fear in his eyes. I'm going to finish you both off. The promise hung in the air, and then I left. But that night was just the beginning. Because as I drove around the city aimlessly, trying to process everything, something inside me changed. It wasn't just the pain or the anger. It was an unrelenting need for justice. They weren't going to get away with it. I knew this with every fiber of my being. The words echoed in my head, over and over again, I'm going to finish you both off. But what I didn't know, at that moment, was that destiny was already plotting something much bigger than I could have ever predicted. Something that would not only destroy them, but also reveal secrets that no one in that room could imagine. Secrets that would make each of them wish they had never crossed my path. Welcome to the channel where stories of love, betrayal and unexpected twists come to life. Here, we never support any type of betrayal. On the contrary, our fictional stories show how infidelity can destroy lives, hearts and dreams. Get ready for an intense and shocking narrative, full of emotions, secrets and revenge. Take a breath. The story will begin now. Lucas leaned his forehead against the cold glass of the window, observing the city that seemed to never stop. The illuminated buildings, the busy streets and the muffled sound of horns were like a backdrop to the silence he felt inside. The apartment was impeccably tidy, but there was an emptiness that not even the modern decor and elegant furniture could fill. He took a deep breath and squeezed the glass of whiskey in his hands, feeling the golden liquid slide down his throat. The night was just beginning, but to him, it felt like it had been over for a long time. Lucas had always been seen as a successful man. At 35, he was a manager at a large technology company, had a respectable social circle and a marriage that, to everyone, seemed perfect. He and Amanda were the couple admired by friends and colleagues. Beautiful, charismatic and passionate, or at least that's how everyone saw them. But, privately, things had changed. The smiles exchanged in the photos no longer reflected the reality of what happened between those four walls. Amanda was the type of woman who attracted attention wherever she went. Brunette, with green eyes and a charming smile, she caught people's eyes without even realizing it. She worked as an architect and was talented at what she did, recognized for her sophisticated and creative projects. But behind the image of a confident and independent woman, there were insecurities that she hid even from herself. Their relationship had started like a fairy tale. They met at a party with mutual friends and, from the first exchange of glances, it seemed like they were destined to be together. Lucas had always been protective, attentive to details and willing to make Amanda feel special. And she, in turn, was sweet, affectionate and spontaneous. They shared dreams and plans for the future, but over time, everyday life began to erode the connection that once seemed unshakable. Lucas's job required constant travel and endless nights in meetings. Amanda, on the other hand, spent hours alone in the apartment or immersed in her projects. At first, she understood the demands of his career, but gradually she began to feel neglected. Conversations lost their depth, displays of affection became scarce, and nights previously filled with laughter and intimacy gave way to silence. Despite this, Lucas believed that everything was under control. He saw the distance as something temporary, the result of the tiring routine and the weight of responsibilities. I planned to make it up to her with romantic trips and surprises that never got off the ground. Amanda, however, began to feel alone even when she was by his side. And loneliness, accompanied by emotional emptiness, made her start to question what still existed between them. That night, Amanda was getting ready to go out. She had mentioned a get-together dinner with co-workers, something Lucas barely paid attention to when she mentioned it days before. She wore a red dress that hugged her body in an elegant and sensual way. Lucas watched her from across the room, feeling a tightness in his chest. It's been a while since I've seen her dress up like that, with so much dedication. He wanted to praise her, but the words stuck in his throat. Will you be long? He asked, trying to sound casual. Amanda smiled at the reflection in the mirror as she applied lipstick. I don't know, maybe a little. It's going to be a long night. Her tone was light, but something about the response made Lucas frown. He felt an unexpected discomfort, but quickly shook the thought away. He was tired, and the last thing he wanted was to start an argument. Have fun. She turned to him and hesitated for a moment. Thanks. Lucas saw something in her eyes that he couldn't decipher. She seemed nervous, but he chose to ignore it. The door closed behind her, leaving him alone in the silent apartment. As Amanda went down the elevator, she felt her heart beating faster. She loved Lucas, but she couldn't deny that something had been lost between them. I missed feeling desired, being seen, being a priority. As he looked at himself in the elevator mirror, he tried to convince himself that that night was just another professional event. She was trying to suppress the guilt that was starting to build up inside her, but she knew there was more behind the anxiety she felt. Lucas, on the other hand, sank onto the sofa, with his cell phone in his hand, but without the energy to do anything. He thought about calling Amanda or sending a message, but decided against it. I knew she hated being controlled and didn't want to appear insecure. He tried to distract himself with the news on television, but the feeling of emptiness wouldn't leave him. He couldn't explain why that night felt different. The previous months had been marked by small wear and tear. Lucas tried to compensate for his absence with gifts and expensive dinners, but Amanda seemed increasingly distant. He noticed the blank stares, the short answers and the moments when she was lost in thought. He tried to ignore it, but it was eating him up inside. Amanda, in turn, felt guilty for not being able to rekindle what was between them. No matter how hard I tried, I felt like something was missing. And that gap, that invisible hole, seemed to grow bigger every day. She didn't want to give up on her marriage, but the feeling of being suffocated was getting stronger and stronger. The night progressed and Lucas continued to look at the clock. He didn't know why he waited so long for a message from her, but when dawn arrived and his cell phone remained silent, the discomfort became unbearable. He got up and walked around the room, trying to rationalize his feelings. Was he being paranoid? Or had something really changed between them? While Lucas struggled with his own thoughts, Amanda was surrounded by colleagues and laughter. But even in the crowd, she felt restless. I looked at my cell phone and thought about sending a message, but I was afraid that he would notice something wrong. She knew that night could change everything. The clock said 2 in the morning when Lucas finally got his car keys. The restlessness had turned into an uncontrollable impulse. He needed to see her, needed to understand why he couldn't shake that feeling that something was about to fall apart. As I drove through the empty streets, each kilometer covered seemed to carry the weight of doubts and fears accumulated over the last few months. Lucas knew that, when he walked through those doors, nothing would be the same again. And he wasn't wrong. Lucas barely slept that night. The hours passed, but the restlessness only grew. The absence of messages from Amanda made him increasingly impatient. The emptiness in the apartment seemed to echo inside him, and every sound that came from the street only reinforced the feeling that something was wrong. He tried to ignore it, tried to convince himself that he was being paranoid, but the idea of Amanda at that party, smiling and surrounded by people he didn't even really know, gnawed at his mind. The next morning, Lucas got up with heavy eyes, but determination in his steps. He decided to act as if nothing was happening, as if the discomfort from the previous night was just the result of accumulated tiredness. He prepared coffee and sent a message to Amanda, asking how dinner had been. Minutes passed without a response. After half an hour, he decided to call. Her cell phone rang until it went to voicemail. The day dragged on. At work, Lucas could barely concentrate. Every vibration of his phone made him look up hoping to see her name on the screen, but the notifications were just irrelevant emails and messages. When he finally received a response, it was short and vague. Amanda said she arrived late, was tired and needed time to rest. Lucas read those words over and over again, but they offered no comfort. On the contrary, they increased the feeling of distance. The following days followed a similar pattern. Amanda seemed more distracted, more absent. She went out more often, always with excuses about meetings or professional commitments. Lucas tried not to show distrust, but the feeling that something was wrong grew. Small details began to catch his attention, the way she avoided eye contact, how she hid her cell phone when he was nearby, or how she answered simple questions evasively. One night, while Amanda was taking a shower, Lucas sat up in bed and saw her cell phone vibrate. The name that appeared on the screen was one he didn't recognize. For a moment, he hesitated. To open or not to open? He felt his stomach tighten, but the need for answers overcame his hesitation. What he found was a message history that made his heart race. The words were intimate, full of smiles and innuendo. The photos exchanged revealed a closeness that went far beyond friendship. Lucas felt his blood boil, but also a deep pain, as if the ground beneath his feet had collapsed. He put the cell phone back and stood up, unable to stay there. That night, Amanda slept peacefully, while Lucas stared at the bedroom ceiling, feeling the trust and love he had for her being crushed by an overwhelming wave of betrayal. In the following days, he began to observe Amanda with different eyes. Every exit, every incoming call, and every distracted glance seemed to confirm his suspicions. Lucas didn't confront Amanda right away. Instead, he decided to wait, gather more evidence, understand where this was going. And the more I observed, the more I discovered. Deleted messages, inconsistent schedules, disconnected explanations. He already knew the truth, but he needed to see it with his own eyes. It was then that he decided to follow her. It was a Friday night when Amanda said she was going out for another appointment with work colleagues. Lucas waited for her to leave and, a few minutes later, he took his car keys and began to follow her. The route seemed ordinary at first, but his heart quickened when he saw Amanda park in front of an elegant restaurant. He watched from afar as she got out of the car. She wore the same red dress as the other night, the same perfume he used to compliment her on. Amanda entered and, a few minutes later, Lucas saw a man approach and greet her with a hug that seemed too intimate to be just a colleague. Lucas felt his throat close and his vision blur. It was him. The man who, months before, had been at her house during a dinner Amanda organized for her work friends. A man Lucas had greeted and treated with respect, without ever imagining what was happening behind his eyes. He continued to watch as the two talked and laughed, completely oblivious to the world around them. Every gesture, every subtle touch, felt like a blow to Lucas's chest. The confirmation he feared was there, before him. When the two left the restaurant and headed to a nearby hotel, Lucas felt the world spin. Pain mixed with anger drove him to act. He got out of the car and walked to the hotel entrance. The words he was going to say burned in his mind, but when he reached reception, he saw Amanda and her lover disappear down the hallway. Lucas did not follow them. Instead, he left the hotel, feeling heavy as if he were carrying his own failure on his shoulders. He walked down the street trying to organize his thoughts, but the only thing he could hear was the echo of the laughter and whispers he witnessed. The ride home was a blur. When he arrived at the apartment, he grabbed a glass of whiskey and sat on the couch, staring into space. He wanted to scream, to confront her immediately, but he knew that wouldn't be enough. I needed to understand why. I needed to know where this was going. Hours passed, and Lucas waited for Amanda to return. When he finally heard the key turn in the lock, he stood still, watching as she entered with the same carefree smile. She didn't even notice his stiff expression. "How was your night?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Amanda hesitated for a second before responding. "It was great. But I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a shower and sleep." She walked past him, and Lucas smelled her perfume mixed with something he couldn't identify. A strange smell that made his stomach turn. He waited until he heard her close the bathroom door before taking her cell phone again. This time, there were no more doubts. The messages confirmed everything. Lucas felt his chest tighten. It was real. She was cheating on him. As Amanda got ready for bed, he stood in the hallway, staring at the bedroom door and feeling the weight of what he had just discovered. What would he do now? And, more importantly, what was she still hiding? The answers were yet to come, but Lucas knew that, from now on, nothing would be the same. Lucas felt the weight of silence in the apartment. Amanda slept, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions that boiled inside him. The betrayal was already a fact. He had seen with his own eyes, felt in his own chest the impact of every touch and smile he witnessed between her and that man. But what gnawed at him most wasn't just the act itself, it was the desperate need to understand. He needed to know why. He needed to confront her and get the answers that kept him up night after night. The next morning, Amanda woke up as if nothing had happened. She went downstairs with her hair still damp from the shower and a slight smile on her lips, but Lucas's gaze, fixed and cold, made her smile falter. What it was? He asked, feeling the discomfort growing in the air. Lucas crossed his arms, trying to control his breathing. I need to talk to you. She hesitated. Now. I'm late for work. This can't wait. The seriousness in his voice made Amanda drop her bag on the counter and sit on the couch. Lucas remained standing, as if the proximity were unbearable. Who is he? Amanda stood still, but the blush that rose to her face gave her away before she could even open her mouth. Lucas, don't try to deny it. I saw you. I know. The confession took the air out of him, as if the words had physical weight. Amanda looked down, her hands shaking on her knees. I can explain what? How did you destroy our marriage? How did you lie to me while smiling in my face? How did you? He stopped, squeezing his eyes shut as if that could contain his anger. Amanda stood up, her voice shaking. You were never here, Lucas. I spent months trying to feel seen, trying to feel loved. And you only cared about work, about your problems. So the solution was to cheat. Did you go to sleep with another man while I was here thinking everything was fine? I didn't plan this. It happened. Lucas laughed, a bitter, choked laugh. It happened. As if falling into another man's bed was something inevitable. Amanda stepped forward, tears in her eyes. I made a mistake, Lucas. I know that. But what? He interrupted her. She hesitated. He looked at him as if he was deciding whether or not to say what needed to be said. It's not just that. Lucas felt his entire body tense. What else are you hiding? Amanda started to walk around the room, nervous. I didn't want it to be like this. I tried to finish. But what? Speak soon. She stopped and took a deep breath. He threatened me. Lucas was silent, waiting for more. He knows things about me, about us. Lucas frowned. What kind of things? Amanda hesitated again, but his expression demanded an answer. Finance. The business. He knows about the money you moved into that offshore account for the company's investment. The shock left Lucas speechless for a moment. How does he know that? I told you. What? His voice came out as a roar. It was a mistake. I was feeling alone, suffocated. I needed to get it off my chest, and he seemed to trust me. I didn't think about the consequences, until he started using it against me. Lucas ran his hands through his hair, trying to absorb the information. Did you tell the guy you were cheating on me about a confidential financial transaction? He threatened to expose everything, Lucas. He said that if I didn't continue, if I didn't stay with him, he would hand over the documents to the police. Lucas walked away, pacing back and forth. You put everything at risk. The marriage, the company, my reputation. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. He stopped and looked at her. And now? What more does he want? Amanda wiped away her tears. He wants money. He wants me to convince you to pay him to stay silent. Lucas remained silent, the weight of the revelation suffocating him. He felt the world spin as he realized the depth of the betrayal. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about trust, about the future, about everything he had built. He approached her, his eyes burning. Do you really think I'm going to pay? Do you think I'm going to let this man destroy my life after all this? Amanda grabbed his arm. Please, Lucas. I don't know what to do. He walked away, his eyes fixed on her as if he saw a stranger. I know what to do. And believe me, Amanda, he won't get away with this. Silence returned to the apartment, but now it was different. Loaded. Cutting. Amanda collapsed on the couch as Lucas grabbed his phone and walked out the door without looking back. The following night promised to be decisive. And Lucas was determined to resolve this once and for all. What he didn't know was that the worst was yet to come. Lucas left the apartment with quick steps and his mind on fire. Amanda's revelation had turned everything upside down. It was no longer just a matter of betrayal, now there was a real risk to his career, his reputation and, worse, his freedom. The lover's threat wasn't just an emotional problem, it was a direct attack on everything he had built. The night air felt heavy as Lucas drove without a clear destination. Anger mixed with the urgent need to act. Amanda had handed over sensitive information, and now it was in the hands of a man who knew too much and who had already demonstrated that he had no scruples. The physical betrayal was a deep wound, but the professional blow made him bleed even worse. He parked on a deserted street and tried to think. I needed to find a way to neutralize that threat before the damage was irreparable. He picked up the phone and called an old friend, Ricardo, a criminal lawyer who had dealt with delicate situations in the past. I need your help, he said as soon as Ricardo answered. And it's serious. What happened? Ricardo asked, his voice full of concern. Lucas hesitated for a moment, but knew he needed to be direct. I was betrayed. And to make matters worse, the guy she was with blackmailed me. He has information about a financial move that could get me in trouble. Damn, Lucas. This is serious. Do you know how much this can harm you? I know. And that's why I need to resolve this now. I need to know what I can do legally. The first thing is to find out exactly what he has. Without it, we are walking in the dark. And the second thing, Ricardo paused. You cannot take any hasty action. Lucas closed his eyes, holding back the urge to scream. I need to act quickly. This guy could end everything. Let's meet tomorrow. Don't do anything until then. Promise? Lucas hung up without answering. I knew Ricardo was right, but waiting seemed impossible. Hours later, he parked in front of the restaurant where he had seen Amanda and her lover the week before. She waited in the car until she saw him leave. When the man entered the parking lot, Lucas got out and intercepted him before he could open the car door. We need to talk. The man took a step back, surprised. Lucas, this is not the time for this, isn't it time? He interrupted, his voice full of fury. You destroyed my marriage and now you want to destroy my life. I won't let that happen. Listen, you don't need this. We can resolve this another way. Lucas took a step forward. Solve. The way you decided to blackmail Amanda. The man tried to remain calm, but the tension was evident. I just want what's fair. Fair? Do you think it's fair to steal my wife and then try to take my money? I didn't steal anything. She came to me because she was lost. Because you weren't there. The words were like a punch, but Lucas didn't let himself be shaken. You will give me everything you have. All documents, messages, everything. And it will disappear. The man laughed, but the sound sounded nervous. And why would I do that? Lucas moved even closer. Because if you don't, I swear I'll end you. Silence took over the parking lot for a few seconds until the man took a step back. I need time. You have until tomorrow. And if you try anything, I guarantee you will regret it. Lucas returned to the car with his hands shaking. I knew this was far from over. He didn't trust that man for a second. Back at the apartment, Amanda was awake, sitting on the couch with her eyes swollen from crying. Where were you? He asked, his voice weak. Solving the problem you created. Lucas, she tried to get closer, but he backed away. I can't look at you right now. I trusted you. I gave you everything. And you did it. I was scared. I felt trapped. No, Amanda. You made a choice. And now I'm paying the price. She broke down in tears, but Lucas no longer felt sorry. There was love there, buried beneath the hurt, but he didn't know if he'd ever be able to dig it out. The next morning, Ricardo arrived at the apartment. You should have waited. I could not. He already knows I'm after him. This only makes things worse. Ricardo sat in the chair and opened the folder he was carrying. I did some quick research on him. Real name is Daniel Vasquez. He has a dirty history. Fraud. He's dangerous, Lucas. This is nothing new. What I need to know is how to take him down. Ricardo looked at Lucas seriously. We can use his history against him. If we can prove that he has extorted other people, we can discredit him. But to do that, we need the evidence he has against you. Lucas nodded, but worry still hung in the air. Hours later, she received a message from Daniel arranging a meeting. The place was a remote hotel, away from prying eyes. Lucas knew it was risky, but he felt this was his chance to put an end to it. He arrived before the agreed time and waited at the entrance. When Daniel appeared, he had a folder in his hands and a smile of someone who felt in control. It's all here, he said, waving the folder. But I need my guarantee. Lucas took an envelope with money and handed it to him. That's all you'll get. And now give it to me. Daniel hesitated, but handed over the folder. Lucas opened and leafed through the documents. There were copies of financial transactions, records of compromising messages. Everything that could be used against him. It's over, said Lucas, closing the folder. But as he turned to leave, he heard the sound of a click. He turned around in time to see Daniel pull out a phone and take a photo. This isn't going to end that easily. Daniel smiled. I always have an ace up my sleeve. Lucas felt his blood boil again. I warned you that you would regret it. And, at that moment, I knew there was still much more to be resolved. Lucas left the hotel with his fists clenched and the briefcase pressed to his chest. The sharp night wind didn't seem to alleviate the heat of anger rising in his body. Daniel had made it clear he wasn't going to back down. The photo taken at the last moment was a cruel reminder that this was far from over. Even though I had the documents in hand, the threat hung in the air like a blade about to fall. As I drove, I felt my heart beating fast. The mind swirled with possibilities and consequences. What did Daniel still have? Was it just a provocation to maintain control? Or was there something more? Lucas knew he couldn't take any risks. He needed a plan, something that would put him ahead of this situation before everything got out of hand. When he got home, Amanda was sitting on the couch, with her eyes fixed on the door. She stood up as soon as he entered, but his expression made her stop. It achieved? He asked, his voice trembling. Lucas threw the folder on the table, and Amanda opened it, leafing through the pages in a hurry. It's all here. She sighed in relief, but Lucas remained motionless. That doesn't mean it's over. Amanda looked up, confused. Like this? He took a photo of me with this folder. I wanted to make it clear that you still have control over us. She turned pale, dropping the papers on the table. And now? Lucas turned around, walking through the apartment. Now I need to know how far he's willing to go. Are you scared of him? It's not fear, Amanda. It's caution. This man has nothing to lose. The silence between them was suffocating. Amanda approached hesitantly. I'm very sorry. Lucas pulled away, refusing her touch. It's not enough to feel sorry. I need you to understand the gravity of this. This man used you to get to me. And you let him in. Amanda lowered her head, holding back tears. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe it can't be fixed. He took the folder and went to the office, leaving Amanda alone in the middle of the room. She sank onto the couch, feeling the weight of everything she had caused. Lucas' words echoed in her head, mixed with the growing fear of what could happen. In the office, Lucas examined the documents. Even with Daniel's threat, he knew he needed to remain calm. He began to analyze each sheet, each detail, looking for something that he could use against him. It was then that he noticed a pattern in the records. A series of transfers made to unknown accounts, associated with Daniel's name, but masked by intermediaries. Lucas picked up the phone and called Ricardo. "I need you to analyze the documents I got. I think I found something that could turn this in my favor. I'm going to stop by your house now." When Ricardo arrived, the two spent hours analyzing the data. The lawyer confirmed what Lucas suspected. Daniel wasn't just a blackmailer, he had a suspicious financial history that could get him into even bigger trouble. "This could be the turning point," said Ricardo. "If we use this information, we can pressure him back." Lucas nodded, but he knew there were still risks. "What if he goes further? If you expose everything before we can react? You need to be careful. But, above all, you need to control the narrative." The next morning, Lucas decided to act. "I knew I needed to face Daniel directly, but this time with an advantage." He called him and arranged another meeting. This time, in a public place. When Daniel arrived, he found Lucas sitting in a cafe, with Ricardo at his side. The lawyer's presence made him visibly uncomfortable. "What is that?" he asked, looking at Ricardo. "This is the beginning of the end for you," Lucas said, sliding a copy of the compromising documents to the other side of the table. "I know who you are. I know what you did before and what you are doing now." Daniel leafed through the papers and swallowed. "That doesn't prove anything. Proof enough to finish you off. And unlike you, I have a real lawyer on my side." Ricardo intervened. "You can try to continue this blackmail, but I guarantee that if you do, you will be arrested before you even think about spending a cent." Daniel laughed, but there was something broken about that laugh. "Do you think you can scare me?" Lucas leaned over. "I don't need to scare you. I just need to expose you. And believe me, I'm willing to do that." The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel looked from one to the other, clearly weighing his options. "What do you want? May you disappear? Let him forget that Amanda and I exist. What if I don't do it?" Lucas opened his cell phone and showed a redacted email, ready to be sent to the police and the press. "I pressed that button." Daniel stood still, his face tense. Finally, he pushed the papers back and stood up. "You're going to regret this." He left, leaving Lucas and Ricardo watching. Back at the apartment, Amanda was sitting on the couch, anxious. "And then?" "He left. At least for now." She ran to him, trying to hug him, but Lucas backed away. "I still don't trust you." Amanda froze, her face contorting in pain. "I did everything wrong. But I love you, Lucas. Love wasn't enough to stop you from destroying me." She collapsed to the floor, crying. Lucas watched her for a moment before walking away. He knew there was still a lot to resolve, between them, within himself. The immediate danger had passed, but the scars remained. And, while Amanda cried on the floor, Lucas wondered if he would ever be able to forgive her or if that wound would remain open forever. Lucas sat on the park bench, his eyes fixed on the dry leaves dancing in the wind. It had been weeks since his final confrontation with Daniel, but the weight of that night still haunted him. The silence of the place contrasted with the storm that carried inside. Even with the threat apparently neutralized, the betrayal and lies had left marks that he knew would never completely disappear. Amanda was slowly disappearing from his life. After that last conversation at home, she tried for days to find ways to redeem herself. Messages, calls, notes left on the office door. But Lucas didn't respond to any of them. The pain was too great to allow any kind of reconciliation. He knew that if he gave in, he would always carry fear and distrust. The love he had once felt for Amanda seemed buried under the weight of disappointment. When they finally agreed to sign the divorce papers, the meeting at the registry office was cold. Amanda cried, but Lucas stood firm, determined to move forward without looking back. She tried to speak one more time before they left. "I never wanted to hurt you." Lucas just nodded but didn't say anything. He knew that nothing she said could erase what had happened. When Amanda walked out the door, he felt relief and emptiness at the same time. But Amanda also carried her own wounds. The breakup left her in ruins, not only emotionally but also financially. She was forced to sell the apartment she shared with Lucas to cover part of the debts she had accumulated trying to resolve the situation with Daniel. He moved to a smaller apartment and began looking for new projects, but his professional reputation was also tarnished. Rumors about her involvement with Daniel spread among colleagues, making each new opportunity more difficult. Alone, Amanda spent months reflecting on the choices that led her to that point. "I knew there was no going back, and the pain of losing Lucas weighed more than any material consequences." She thought about looking for him again, but realized it would be useless. "As much as I still loved him, I knew I no longer had space in his life." Daniel, on the other hand, faced complete breakdown. The evidence that Lucas and Ricardo had on him was handed over to the police, and investigations revealed a history of fraud and extortion that went far beyond the case with Amanda. Arrested, he tried to bargain for information to reduce his sentence, but there was no longer any way to escape. His downfall was swift and public, and he soon disappeared from the news and conversation. Meanwhile, Lucas has found a strange kind of peace in the routine. The first few months were lonely, but over time he began to open up to new possibilities. One day, while having coffee in a bookstore, he met Sophia, a photographer who worked in the same area. She was different from Amanda. Simpler, lighter, and the connection between the two emerged unexpectedly. They began to meet frequently, and for the first time in months, Lucas felt like he could breathe without the weight of the past. Sophia didn't know his story at first, but when Lucas finally told him everything, she didn't judge. He just listened to him, held his hand and said, "This does not define who you are." Her words stuck in Lucas's mind. For the first time, he felt like he could leave the past behind without carrying guilt or regret. With Sophia, he learned to trust again, but this time more carefully, with more maturity. As time passed, Amanda continued to deal with the consequences of her actions. Although he learned from his mistakes, the opportunities didn't seem to come back. Loneliness became her constant companion, and guilt was a weight she knew she would carry forever. Lucas, on the other hand, moved on. Little by little, he built a relationship with Sophia based on transparency and trust. He knew he would never forget what he had been through, but he also knew that those scars made him into someone stronger. Amanda's betrayal and Daniel's threat showed Lucas how fragile appearances can be and how dangerous it is to ignore signs. But they also taught that recovery is possible, even when all seems lost. As he walked alongside Sophia that afternoon in the park, Lucas looked up at the sky and smiled. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he could move forward without looking back. And so, everyone went their own way. Amanda, dealing with the consequences of her own choices. Daniel, trapped and forgotten. And Lucas, finally at peace, rebuilding his life alongside someone who brought him hope again. Now it's up to you. What did you think of this story? Leave your comment below and share your opinion about the characters, their decisions, and how it all ended. We want to hear your perspective. And if you liked this narrative full of twists, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. Remembering that here we do not support any type of betrayal. On the contrary, we show how wrong choices can destroy lives and how important it is to reflect before acting. Thanks for following along this far and see you in the next story.